Let me transport you back to London, 1888. The gas lamps are lit, but they don't reach far. Sound disappears quickly here, swallowed by fog and narrow streets. In places like Whitechapel, being unseen isn't unusual. It's expected. Today I am not interested in a name. I'm interested in the conditions that made one possible. I'm Jenny. I love history and I'm fascinated by the moments where human psychology collides with it in the worst possible ways. Each episode I'll be sharing what I found and asking what it might mean. By the late 19th century, London had become the largest city in the world. It was a place that celebrated industry, progress, and empire, while quietly accepting that not everybody would benefit from them. Wealth and poverty lived side by side, separated not by distance, but by indifference. In the East End, particularly in Whitechapel, life was dense and precarious. Overcrowding was severe, and work was irregular. A single missed shift, a single illness, could mean the difference between a bed for the night and the street. Lodging houses offered temporary shelter, rows of narrow beds packed close together, rented for a few pennies at a time. People arrived late. People left early. Names were not always exchanged, and questions were rarely asked. In a place like this, disappearance didn't feel dramatic. It felt ordinary. Whitechapel was not lawless. It was regulated, observed and patrolled, but unevenly. Police presence fluctuated, and trust in authority was fragile. Many residents had learnt that drawing attention to themselves rarely led to protection. Survival depended on blending in, on knowing when to speak and when to vanish into the crowd. And when a place teaches people how to disappear, it also teaches someone else how to move unnoticed. The murders later attributed to Jack the Ripper did not erupt into an orderly, attentive city. They unfolded in a neighbourhood already accustomed to hardship, already trained to mind its own business. That context mattered, because violence doesn't happen in a vacuum. It takes shape inside routines, expectations, and silences that already exist. Daily life in Whitechapel followed its own quiet logic. Most people rose early, not because they wanted to, but because opportunity was unpredictable. Work appeared and vanished without warning. Dock labour, factory shifts, street selling. Everything depended on timing, strength and luck. For women especially, evenings often meant returning to the streets, not always by choice, and rarely with protection. The line between survival and danger was thin, and it shifted constantly. Streets stayed busy late into the night, markets lingered, pubs emptied and refilled. Footsteps overlapped, voices blended, and faces passed without comment. Familiarity did not equal safety. It simply meant recognition without responsibility. No one was watching, and that mattered. When we talk about violent crime, there's a temptation to look for something extraordinary, a brilliant mind, a monstrous nature, and a clear breaking point. But more often what we find instead is someone who understands their environment very, very well. Someone who notices which streets empty first, which doors close early, which faces are unlikely to be remembered. This kind of awareness doesn't require genius. It requires attentiveness, patience, familiarity. In places like Whitechapel, people learn to move without drawing attention, to keep their heads down and to take up as little space as possible. But those same lessons could be learned in reverse. Someone watching closely could learn how to blend in, not as a defence but as a tactic. And over time, that invisibility can become intoxicating. Because to be unseen is one thing. To realise you are unseen and can act because of it is another entirely. Violence doesn't begin with chaos. It begins with opportunity, with a sense that boundaries are flexible, that consequences are distant, that certain lives will not be immediately missed. Whitechapel did not create a killer, but it provided the conditions in which one could operate. When the murders began to draw attention, the response from authorities was uneven, not because no one cared, but because care, like everything else in Victorian London, was stratified. Policing in Whitechapel was reactive rather than preventative. Patrols increased after incidents and then quietly receded again. For many residents, police presence was not a source of comfort. Reporting violence carried risks, scrutiny, blame, and disruption to already fragile routines. Silence remained the safer option. What ultimately changed the scale of the crimes was not intervention, but attention. Newspapers seized the story. Headlines grew larger. Language grew sharper. Fear became something that could be sold. And when violence is repeated, echoed, and mythologized, it can begin to feel consequential in a new way. Fear becomes feedback. Eventually, the city crossed an invisible threshold. Streets changed, habits shifted, patrols increased. And just as quietly as they had begun, the murders stopped. There was no neat resolution, just absence. This story was never really about a single person. It was about a place, a moment, and the systems that decided who would be seen and who would not. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, but it does remember what we're willing to ignore. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care and be gentle with what history leaves behind.